Welcome to the Psychedelic Couch. Before we dive into today's discussion, we remind our listeners that using illicit drugs carries significant risks and legal consequences. Psychedelic substances like LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, MDMA, and DMT are illegal in many countries, including the UK, and their possession or use can lead to legal penalties. Psychedelics can have profound effects on mental and physical health. While some report positive experiences, others may face negative effects like anxiety and psychosis. These substances can also interact unpredictably with medications and underlying conditions. Approach psychedelics with caution and responsibility. This podcast shares information, not encouragement or advocacy for illegal use. If you or someone you know struggles with substance abuse, seek help from healthcare professionals or local support services. In this conversation, Chiara Baldini explores the transformative power of festivals as spaces for both personal growth and societal change. She discusses the historical significance of countercultural events and their role in promoting revolutionary values. Chiara shares insights from her co-edited anthology, The Psychedelic Mysteries of the Feminine, which examines the intersection of the feminine principle and altered states of consciousness. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Hello.
Hello, do you hear me?
Hi, I do hear you, Chiara. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Oh, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation. I really appreciate your time. I saw you talk at Breaking Convention and I was so moved by your talk, which was brilliant. And I thought having a conversation around, the power of festivals, because we hear so much about the clinical and therapeutic applications of psychedelics, right? And, to really explore the recreational use and bring that into the conversation feels really important.
Yes, it does. Also because these categorizations can be so sterile, because when you go to a festival, you can have a therapeutic experience or you can have a ceremonial or sacred kind of experience. So they're so linked, all these different ways in which psychedelics can transform us, and also not just psychedelics, but generally experiences of altered state. Because also dancing over a long time on repetitive beats can lead you to an altered state without the use of substances. And that kind of experience can be incredibly transformational and healing and sacred.
And doing it in community with others, being in that space together, and often in nature. We were talking about, I mentioned kind of Africa Burn, being in these incredible spaces with a collective is so powerful.
Yeah, and actually in one of my strongest experiences in the dance floor, it was exactly that togetherness that really hit me in a way, in a positive way, in terms of feeling a bond with everybody else that I had never felt in any other collective experience that I had, including peace demonstrations. In 2003 against the war in Iraq, I participated to a lot of those, and political activism also, to which I had participated. And then I found myself in this huge dance floor in the Boom Festival in 2004. And that sense of togetherness and belonging and bonding was something very unique and powerful.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about your background and what led you to study the evolution and culture identity of festivals and their origins?
Yeah, so this event I was referring to in 2004 in Portugal, the Boom Festival was one of the strongest initiations that I had in festivals. I had already discovered psytrance culture in London before, as I was doing my Erasmus program from Italy to the UK. Yeah, I was just very fascinated, and I set myself on a journey to find out more about what these events were and what kind of people were attending. And then in 2004, I had this strong initiatory, we could say, experience in the dance floor, at the end of which I felt, or I received the mission, let's say, to study how did we get here. This was my question in the morning. And I wanted to know if this was something new, if this was something old that we were doing in a new way. And I started, reading in a spontaneous way, book after book. And I ended up in the mystery religions of ancient Greece and the cult of Dionysus and all of these kind of like quote unquote shamanic, and the quotes are important, kind of experiences or experiences of altered state of consciousness, ecstatic experiences in our Western history. So my question was also, how did we do it in our past? Because I was already familiar with ecstatic or shamanic experiences through other cultures that are non-Western. And I was very curious about how I kind of felt that there must have been a time and there must have been a way in which we have done something similar. And so, yeah, ancient Greece was the place where I landed. And also the mysteries of Eleusis that are also quite renowned in the psychedelic scene, because Albert Hoffman had studied the secret of the mysteries and proposed that an LSD-like compound was used in this collective initiatory experience, maybe the most famous in the ancient world in the Mediterranean area. So yeah, I got, to this, I landed in this time and space, and I found so many information that helped me to frame and integrate the kind of experiences I was having in festivals. And then I slowly started giving presentations and writing essays and kind of giving back the information that I was receiving.
Yeah, so maybe can you tell us where you landed? Tell us a bit more about, ancient Greece and Rome and what you discovered in your explorations.
Well, the cult of Dionysus has been something that I've researched a lot because of, the similarity in the techniques of ecstasy. So again, dancing over repetitive beats for long periods of time, and ingestion of psychotropic substances. These two are two main techniques that they would use in these rituals, together with ceremonial sexuality, which we are not so familiar with, depending what lineage of festival you go to, maybe.
Yeah.
But still, in the psytrance culture, at least, it was not as common as maybe in other festivals that are smaller, maybe, or don't happen really in the main dance floor. But so the Dionysian people, they had different ways to approach these kind of practices. But in terms of repetitive beats, using the frame drum, that is what we call, again, quote unquote, shamanic drum. I say quote unquote also because the word shamanic referred to Western traditions is problematic, and even referring to other traditions that are not Mongolian, because the word come from that area. So I'm aware of the current debate over the use and the problems around the use of these terms. That's why I use quotes, because also I feel we don't really have another term yet.
The word to describe it, yeah.
Yeah, we can say ecstatic, again, referring to this Greek word ecstasis, which means to come out of one state. So, in that sense, technique that induce an altered state of consciousness or a modified state of consciousness. So, shamanic drum, the frame drum was used. I sometimes call it a portable sound system, because It's a beat creating device. Yeah, the actually I was also intrigued by the fact that in Dionysian lineages, in Dionysian different phases of the Dionysian cult, women retained an authority position also as music makers and dancers and initiators, like high priestesses. So this tradition of being able to create specific rhythm patterns that were able to induce an altered state. These women knew how to use these instruments and what kind of patterns to use. And these patterns were probably also handed down generation after generation in an uninterrupted way, which was then later interrupted through when Christianity became, the religion of the pagan world.
And Chiara, was that a reflection of the times, or was that still unusual that women had that power?
So, yeah, because the thing is, Greek times are already patriarchal
Mm,
times, very patriarchal
that's what I
times.
thought.
So these traditions were something that was coming from way back, possibly pre-patriarchal times. These traditions were recognized as something ancient, and for that they were given a certain, importance and respect. But still, they were also considered like women practicing Dionysian rituals, especially the ones that were for women only on top of mountains without the supervision of men. They were considered by their peers, not by everyone, but among their peers, that were people that would kind of consider them as not good women or dangerous
Mm,
or women that behave against their nature as men going on mountains alone and also define human limits in terms of what they could achieve in an altered state. And so that's also what I was interested in researching, this socio-political context of these rituals. And I found this kind of contradictions and as it often happens, even today, when there is the possibility to join a collective experience of altered state, there would be people that support it and understand its value and want to join or not, but still understand that this is something special that has big potential for healing, for reconnecting to ancient ways. And then there is people that are completely against, that are scared, or that consider this kind of loss of control and loss of composure and even loss of rationality,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
as something that should be forbidden and should be repressed. So this kind of ambiguous relationship towards such a radical, because it is a radical experience. This has always been part of our history. So, you have the two sides, those who support and those who want to repress.
And was it predominantly a collection of women, or was it inclusive to all folk?
Apparently, a very ancient form of the practice was for women only, the Maenads, and they did this mountain ritual called orebasia, from the word in Greek for mountain. So the mountain ritual, maybe 6th, 7th, 8th century BC, so like archaic Greek times. And later, during the classical and then Hellenistic time, and even during the Roman imperial age, these rituals were open to everyone and happening in urban context. So there would be both a public form of the cult with these public processions and honoring specific moments of the agricultural year also, or the life cycle of the vine and the harvesting of the grapes and the making of wine. So there were public processions. And then there would be private initiation rituals that were more, um, yeah, secluded, not happening in a public context, but maybe in private homes. And they would famously be open to everyone, including slaves, um, foreigners, or we would say immigrants. So this was also something that was very challenging also later on in the Roman times, when society would be so hierarchical and misogynist also, but also xenophobic, like
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
things that we are still aware of
Experiencing now, yeah.
today. And so these rituals would be spaces where these rules are defined, and people participating are those that believe that there is a way to interact among each other beyond these rules and beyond these categorizations and hierarchies. And so they were always spaces that defy the official authorities and those who represent the values that believe in hierarchies and categorizations. So in this way, the Dionysian people were always considered the revolutionaries and the ones embodying revolutionary values.
Yeah, and do you see that then, that thread going through history up until the kind of present day?
Well, yeah, I mean,
A whistle stop history.
yeah, with the advent of Christianity, but actually the Bacchanalia which were the name of the rites of Dionysus when they were exported into Rome.
Okay.
So Dionysus became Bacchus. So Bacchic rituals were also known as Bacchanalia. They were repressed already in the 2nd century BC, so before the advent of Christ and Christianity. Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century after Christ, or that's when most of the pagan shrines were destroyed. So after that, it kind of like went underground. So it always was part of peasant culture, for example, in a way connected again to the rites of celebration of different moments of the agricultural year, harvesting and winemaking, all of that. But at the same time, yeah, it was also very appealing to the elite
Mm.
because these, orgies are always part also of the debaucheries of different levels of society, whether officially or not, mainly not, but still part, still practiced. Yeah, with the witch hunts, what happened was that was like a final big blow to people that were still connected to these ancient practices, because also the witches were in a way embodying the knowledge of plants, also in terms of not just healing, but also psychotropic properties of plants and certain rituals that we know of the witches, again, gathering for the full moon around the bonfire and being accused of worshiping the devil. This is still remnants of these ancient practices, maybe with different names, slightly different cosmology and mythology. The main goddess was Diana, and she was connected again to the wild nature and the moon and the cycles of the moon and the connection between water and plants with the cycles of the moon. This was all coming from way back.
Was she connected to fertility as well?
Yes,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
fertility in terms
yeah.
of moon cycles and water cycles and seasonal cycles, and how we are connected. We are part of those cycles. And we also go through this dying, composting, and rebirthing, like everything. And so these rites were also celebrations of our place within these astral and vegetation cycles. So in this sense, fertility connected to death and rebirth cycles. So yeah, that was a very big collective trauma, the witch hunts and the killing of so many people, mainly women, but not only. So yeah, that was a big blow. And to me, even if again it survived in pockets here and there where it was possible, but I think actually it was with the 60s counterculture that we could be free again, to free our bodies, to dance in ways that we were not allowed to dance for a long time, to rediscover also, yeah, these mind-altering substances. LSD was popularized in those years, but before then we were taking other things like mushrooms and other combinations of psychotropic plants. So this wave, this new cultural wave that we saw with the counterculture in the 60s has a lot of elements and even values that we saw, in this in the history of pre-patriarchal cultures and how they survived during patriarchal times and how they became, part of the revolution in the 60s.
Yeah, and how that built to Woodstock 69, you mentioned. But before that, almost the boomers being the ones that led to that place. Can you tell us a bit more about that? How we got to that point in the 60s with the hippies?
So yeah, there was many different souls of this movement. And as I mentioned in my presentation, there was a more political side to it that was based around civil rights and anti-racism and the Gay Liberation Front and feminist movement. So we see like all of these elements are seeds of a non-patriarchal way to relate to each other and to recognize the value of all different beings with different identities and different sexual orientations, which has been kind of like caged and turned into a hierarchy of where one dominates over others with patriarchy. So the civil rights movement, the feminist, the gay liberation movement, the pacifist movement, also so important, and how chronic war is connected to patriarchy. And so also back in the day with Dionysian, I won't say activist, but this is a word that is a modern word. But yeah, in a way, also Dionysian principles were pacifist principles of this acceptance of all these different identities and the possibilities to resolve conflict without recurring to this system of chronic war. So in the 60s, all of this was coming up in different sides of the counterculture, together with the research of a way to connect to the divine beyond Christianity. So researching alternative spiritualities like Eastern philosophies or Western esotericism like tarot, astrology, all of that, but also neo-shamanism, again with quotes, and indigenous revivalism. All of these different souls were part of what would later be termed New Age culture. But in the 60s, there was also the political side, together with the spiritual side. Then there was the psychedelic side, of course, with the spreading of LSD and also the research that was still possible around therapeutic use of LSD. And of course, there were people that were more interested in psychedelics and not so much into politics, or vice versa, or more spiritual and not so political, but still the counterculture was a big umbrella under which all these different souls would find a home in a way or another. I presented this information in my presentation, which is actually now on YouTube since
Oh, is
yesterday.
it? Oh, wow.
So yeah, if someone wants to go there, Breaking Convention 2024 with my name.
I'll put a link in the show notes because it's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. So yeah, I offer a possible narrative of what happened after the 60s to the counterculture in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, with the splitting between the spiritual side and the political side, and how these two different sides gave birth to different lineages of countercultural practices and values and identities.
Yeah, like the punk scene you
The
mentioned.
punk scene is an example of a very politicized countercultural scene where the queer feminist aspects are still very strong, together with the anti-fascist and anti-capitalist sides of the counterculture still very strong, and how that gave birth to the techno underground movement. And while the hippies, those who could go to India and dance under the full moon in Goa, gave rise to the psytrance culture. And yeah, also the rediscovery of dancing together as a modern form of ritual, which connected, to my experience in Boom Festival, which is maybe the biggest or most well-known psytrance festival these days, starting in 97, so already more than 25 years old, and how this psytrance lineage took on the psychedelic and spiritual, and also later the more ecological side of the counterculture, but kind of like left behind a stronger political approach, or political activism was kind of like, it went in the backdrop and not so to the forefront. And so, with its benefits and problems connected to it,
Uh,
I wanted to show this mapping of the current situation, also to highlight that it can be a generational process. So, now with the millennials and the Gen Z, because I'm still Gen X and I'm almost 50. So I also feel, my time and the time of my generation is coming to an end in terms of being like the active movers and shakers. Of course, we can be elders and being in support of the new generations, but now the new generations are the ones that need to take the flame of the counterculture and see what to do, and also realize these different lineages. Is it finally time to bring together some of these threads, to weave different narratives than the ones that were possible until now, to bring back the political with the spiritual, and with the psychedelic and with the ecological that are so important? And also, maybe realizing that also the time of Western-led counterculture is over.
yeah, and I was just thinking, I remember one of your slides talking about Georgia that it might not be from where we expect. Do you have a sense of where some of these movements are cropping up?
Well, especially in terms of underground technoculture, which we have an example of in Berlin, for example, and they even received this very prestigious recognition in terms of UNESCO heritage list. But so the underground technoculture is very alive in terms of political activism right now in non-Western countries as well. For example, Georgia and Azerbaijan, they are there in the front row of the demonstrations fighting for a more democratic society, but also fighting to have the rights of the LGBTQ people being recognized, because those countries are very oppressive for these identities. But also, for example, in Palestine, before the war, the techno scene was very alive. Spaces where people could feel safe to express their identity fully in total freedom and safety. And yeah, these events were much more than electronic music and a bunch of young people dancing. They had a very strong political relevance. And so we can see how these are some of the examples. I'm aware, but not, I don't fully know much about Asian countries also being connected to the underground techno scene. So, yeah, there is a lot of new realities that are sprouting, and that could bring, that could be much more radical than we are in the West, because we live in such a privileged space that many of our events are more about having a good time, to tell you the truth, rather than being radical and fighting for a better society. In places where certain, oppressions and discriminations are very strong, yeah, we can see the rise of very radical and important activism that we should support and that we should recognize in its power. And yeah, maybe the next global counterculture will not be led by Westerners, and I think this would be great. Also, what's happening in Iran, for example, where music is prohibited and musicians are arrested and even condemned to death. And so this, it's such a different reality than what we experience. And we see how activists are really giving their lives for these struggles, and they deserve all our respect and our support.
Yeah, really, very well said. Maybe can you tell us a bit more about your history with Boom? Because I know that you were a program creator at the Liminal Village. Like, how did that shape its culture over the years?
Yeah, so I had the privilege and the honor to be curating the program of the cultural area of Boom, more or less from 2010 until last year, 2023. Even if at the beginning I was more of as an assistant, and then I started becoming the curator. It has, like, a cultural area and a festival has such a potential to inspire people in a moment of their life and in their year where they're so open and so ready, to receive. The program of a festival also is different than a program of a conference, even if the area where I was working is a conference area, because you have presentations and workshops one after the other, like in a conference. But the program of a festival has the possibility to offer any kind of topic. We booked people talking from, menstruations and the meaning of the menstrual cycle to the prohibition of nuclear weapons and everything in between. Like the spectrum of possibilities is infinite, and this is what I loved about my job there. And yeah, over the years, we tried to always push the boundaries of what's new and what's relevant and who are the people that could come and talk. Because also, Boom is an extremely multicultural event with people coming from over 170 countries and territories. So it's such an honor also to be speaking at Boom and be speaking to people coming from all of these different areas. So it's a challenge, and it's a huge potential. And yeah, from my perspective, I tried to enlarge this spectrum of possibilities and to go beyond what is normally considered part of the psytrance culture, which, as I said, is a very deep research on psychedelics, psychedelic science also, and the traditional uses of psychedelics in indigenous cultures, but also, yeah, promoting the new research and the new psychedelic renaissance. This is a big part of the identity of the festival, and this we always kept as part of the program. And together with a very big focus on ecology and sustainability, which is another big part of the identity of the festival, thank God, because this is so inspiring for many other events, and it's really good that this is happening, to really, apply practices of sustainability in the festival so that people can come and learn as part of the experience of the festival. And then, of course, spirituality in all its different declinations, but then also the importance to add social justice and reflections on privilege and discrimination, and giving space to marginalized identities, and to reflect on our privileges, and to give some of that away, and also invite people to curate part of the program that maybe, hold identities that have not had this privilege until now. So all of these reflections, I think, were very important to introduce, and to have different people coming from beyond the psytrance culture. I was always like really trying to be aware of our bubbles and to respect our identity, but also to challenge it and to learn from other bubbles and other scenes and cultures. In my years as curator, I always tried to look at that and to practice that.
Yeah, can you share any like anecdotes or stories about some of those experiences? It must be so vast.
Well, we had people of color, for example, because, when we talk about festivals as multicultural events in Europe, well, yes, we had all of Europe represented and all of the westernized countries represented, of course, and a lot of South American and Central American countries. But in terms of people of color, not, it's not so much a culture that where people of color also can identify with, even if more and more people of color are coming. And so we had some activists that were really questioning the white ways of doing festivals, and to listen to them and to really trying to be as open as possible, even to be criticized and to be pointed at, like, as, okay, these are still white festivals, and this is still a white culture. And how do people of color feel when they are in minority, and when they, most of the DJs are white and most of the other workshop leaders are white. And so to hear from people of color how that feels and how that lands in them, and what is their own perspective of, a culture that can cater for more identities than we did until now. So, those presentations were tough, but at least for me, and yeah, for what I could see of the people that were coming there, that, people were crying and people were really listening. Because, as I said, people are very open in those spaces. And of course, the activists that we booked were also very good speakers and people that are very, like, do their work with a lot of integrity. So those were very strong, deep, challenging, and transformational moments.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me a little bit about, or your thoughts and your wisdom on kind of integration of festivals, of these experiences. I remember one of the pictures you showed, there was an image of this woman sort of saying, no one who attended that festival will ever be the same again, or words to that effect. What are your thoughts and wisdom on how people best integrate these experiences, which can be enormously profound?
Yeah, well, over the years, I realized that even when we speak of a transformational experience, what do we really mean? Does it mean that is something that is good for us as individuals, or is good for us as communities? So do we only focus on, yeah, I became more spiritual, and now I'm on my spiritual path, and I'm gonna go to India, and I'm gonna align my chakras. Like this attitude is very common, can look like a transformational experience, but are you still only focusing on your own self, or are you coming back home from the festival ready to become a community organizer and to really bring, for example, what you learned in terms of sustainability to the larger community, so that we can really shift into a more ecologically conscious mindset. So you see, there's this fine line between, was it transformational for you only, or are you able to really bring this into bigger spaces? So, how was your mind affected by the experience of the festival? And the best way, I think, it's this opening to understanding that we are not alone, or we should not focus like this selfishness of the transformation, which is a bit of the direction in which wellness culture is going. From New Age, we're shifting into wellness culture that is very co-opted by capitalism. And so, are we going to go and support retreats that cost 5,000 euros? Or are we going to go back to reality, reality after the festival, and understand that if we have privilege, we need to share it with others and fight for accessibility of less privileged people? So, yeah, the integration is a big topic, and it's one of those topics that can mean many different things to many different people. So maybe, these two different approaches can serve to map a bit the kind of integration that can happen after a festival.
And as you said before, it's not linear, I suppose. It's
Yeah,
it's an ongoing process.
yeah, because also I've been going to festivals for 20 years. So it depends, after each experience, you understand a different perspective, or you go one layer deeper into understanding, how you can serve in a better way. And so it is an ongoing process. And every time, also, if you come especially from a very normal, let's say, upbringing, and live in an urban context, and have been behaving according to specific rules that maybe were imposed on the outside, on you from the outside, in terms of like what it means to be successful, and what it means to, what is happiness for you also. And then you go especially to the good festivals, not all festivals, also there is big differences in festivals. And maybe you start deconstructing all of those notions of what is happiness and what is success in life. So it is a deep process that will take many different experiences, not just one.
And what are your thoughts about the future of festivals? I know that loads haven't been able to continue this year. I had some emails from Love Jam that didn't look like it was going to happen, but I think it is happening now. What do you see as the future and the potential to evolve these spaces as, places for healing and transformation in light of the pressure that they are under in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, that is one aspect, and we can see how that can also turn into greenwashing and something more superficial than it can be. But also I feel that festivals, they can happen on this spectrum between having a good time, escaping from reality, trying to enter a bubble where you forget about the war in Israel-Palestine, for example, or the threat of the nuclear bomb that is becoming so incredibly strong. So, like, do you use festivals, and are festivals created by their promoters as bubbles to escape from those realities? And I just mentioned a few, but there's much more problems that we could improve. Or are festivals and events created and attended as spaces where we can actually recharge and become more aware of the ways in which we can change that reality? So the counterculture is a culture that wish to create a better and improved version of our
Society.
reality.
Mm.
So there will always be festivals that are more or less countercultural and that are more or less entertainment oriented only. Of course, you are in a festival, there's music, you're dancing together. So, of course, there will always be the entertainment aspect of it. But is it just about that? And is that entertainment just about escaping? Or is that entertainment to actually root and ground a different awareness, deeper in ourselves and in us as a group, so that when we go back to reality, we can, make it into a better place? Because also, if we think about Woodstock, that was a space where it was so revolutionary. It was something that changed a whole generation across the whole world because it spread. More events were inspired by it and spread, and that festival was a space where people could experience and put into practice all those different values that were the founding values of the counterculture. So those were spaces where a different way of interacting with each other, of looking at each other and, seeing beyond the stranger or the foreigner or the gay person or the person of color, to go to really interact in ways that in normal society was not possible. So that is an experience that then can plant a seed. And then when you go back, you can, embody that seed and act in a different way. I think still in the future, there will be events that can have that potential. And I really trust that the younger generations, at least some of them, will be able to create those spaces of real inspiration.
Yeah, let's hope so. And what about for you? What are your current projects or initiatives that you're working on?
Yeah, well, after I moved out of working in festivals. I really felt my time had come. I started focusing finally on my research because it goes on, from that day in 2004. Now it's exactly 20 years. I started a couple of years ago a PhD to finally write a dissertation on these topics, on the evolution of ecstatic practices in the West. And I started already giving classes and courses. I did just one on advaya.life. It's still there. One can access it, called the Dionysius Ritual Raven Revolution. And I will continue. I have another one lined up on a different platform in September. So also, if people want to follow my work, you can find updated information that I am posting as they happen on my Instagram account at I am always Chiara. So I give courses, I keep on giving presentations, and I'm also a DJ. So I love to play as DJ Clandestina. You can also find me on SoundCloud. And I love to play ecstatic dance, but not only. And I want to continue being a DJ even as an old woman. So
Amazing.
an old woman DJ, that's my it's my hope.
That's amazing. And can you tell everyone about the anthology, The Psychedelic Mysteries of the Feminine, which sort of explores the intersection of the feminine principle and altered states of consciousness? Can you just elaborate or tell us a little bit about the key findings from that incredible work?
Yeah, thank you. So that's something that I curated with Maria Papaspiro in starting from a panel that we did in 2014 in the Breaking Convention. We felt that we needed a book that was a bit more focusing on this intersection, like you said, between the feminine principle and altered state of consciousness. So it's very vague as an objective. So we started collecting essays, both mainly from women, but not only. And we wanted to keep the topic very open and broad. And also in terms of the contributors, we had academic researchers, but we also had embodied practices practitioners. And yeah, we wanted to offer this broad spectrum approach. So we had people talking about, for example, visionary artists talking about how they paint and how a painting comes to their mind and what is their technique and how do they start channeling the visions that they paint. But then also we wanted to approach the issue of essentializing, which is, when we talk about feminine principle, what is it? Is it something that is well defined? And if we define it well, what are the risks by encapsulating an identity into a specific set of characteristics? So even challenging our own intention to talk about the feminine principle. Then there is a whole section about the history of women as practitioners of ecstatic rituals all over the world. Very amazing essay by Max Dashu that is an expert on history of women, especially from previous cultures all over the world. And then also there was my chapter on the role of women in the cult of Dionysus, and the chapter of Maria Papaspiro, which is also very good on femtheogenic consciousness. So how can we define this feminine consciousness and what is its relation with an altered state, in terms of, the subconscious and its archetypes. So she's also from a Jungian lineage. So yeah, many different. Also, another one that I really like is a feminist perspective on drug policy and drug policy reform and the possibility to have cognitive freedom as one of the human rights, the fundamental human rights. So you see, there's something for everyone, I feel. And even if it was not perfect, and in terms of representation of the authors, it was not extremely, let's say, diverse, because also back then we did our best, but now, thank God, you can access research that is done by a wider variety of identities. And this is something that, shows that our book is it's from some years ago, but it had its value in being, what could be done in those years. Because, yeah, as I said, it's already 10 years that we started working on it, even if it was only published in 2019, but the selection was already done in 2015 and 16, I think. So yeah, I'm still happy with the book and it's still selling well. And so, yeah, it remains as a good testimony in the psychedelic scene.
Yeah, it's an amazing work. And just finally, before we wrap up, like, how do you balance your role as researcher, DJ, curator?
Yeah, this is a good question because I don't know if I have an answer. Yeah, it depends. I try to do a bit of everything because I need to change. I cannot study only, for example. I also need the music in my life and I need to focus on my music selection and the composition of sets is something that takes a lot of time and helps me to move away from this, deep nerd cognitive
Cerebral
approach,
space.
very cerebral. So I go more in the feelings and in the emotions, creating these waves also with ecstatic dance sets. It helps me to balance the different parts of me. And yeah, the festival work was so good because it would put me in touch with a lot of people and a lot of amazing activists and researchers that I would book. And yeah, this has been such a huge, incredible experience. So it's different parts of me that I activate with these different jobs. And all of them, are needed to bring out who I am and to make me feel that I am fully
Live.
able to embody myself in all of these different characteristics. And I transcended the fear of being too weird, to unusual for me now is a good word, and weird is a very good word, and I am going for it. So academic researcher and ecstatic dance DJ, and I also love to present and then to play in the same day, like I did in Breaking
Amazing.
Convention. So yeah, I hope that many more people can really feel free to embody very different aspects of their personality.
Yeah, and to bring that into the essence of who they are, to be alive and to have that fully embodied experience.
Yes.
And where can people find you? Like your Instagram or
Yeah,
website or
so my Instagram is at I'm always Chiara. And yeah, my music is on SoundCloud. So mainly now these are my main outlets because I'm working on my website. So soon I'm gonna have a website that's gonna be in the bio of the Instagram account. So that's coming up soon. And also, if someone wants to attend my upcoming course starting end of September, just follow me on Instagram and you will get that information.
amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chiara. And I hope to see you soon. I'll come and introduce myself next
Yes.
time I'm at an event that you're speaking at.
Yes. Thank you, Claire.
You've been listening to The Psychedelic Couch. For more episodes, please follow me on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts, and find me on Instagram at The Psychedelic Couch and at Claire Faulkner Therapy, where I will be keeping you up to date on the latest episodes and information surrounding all things therapy, psychedelics, and expanded states.